Welcome on back, everybody, to the All Aussie Rules Footy Podcast. Today's episode number 35, and this is our round 15 review. So we're going to jump basically straight into it. I'd like to say it's been a great week of football, but that's debatable. We've had 6 games happen over the weekend. Only one of them was kind of close. One 3-point game. There was a 27, a 20-point, a 30-point, and then 2 blowouts. So, nothing too exciting in the world of football, but some important results that have certainly changed the shape of the season for a couple teams. So, we'll basically jump straight into it. We'll lead off, as always. Before we do jump into the first game, actually, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Whether you're on Spotify or YouTube, all the interactions help, so go give a comment. If you're on YouTube, like it. All that sort of stuff. Also, check out my socials. We have Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. We have them all. There's plenty of content that goes out across them all. So go check all of that out. And, appreciate you for being here. We'll jump into game number 1 of the weekend. It was Carlton versus Geelong. Geelong. As always, need to slow me words down there. That graphic's from before the game, so ignore the stats on there in terms of what actually happened. Friday night footy was Carlton versus Geelong. Carlton got the win comfortably in the end. They kicked 21-12, 138 to Geelong's 11-9, 75 to win by 63 points. Blowout in the end. Carlton kind of controlled the game most of the way in this one. Never really looked like losing. Had the lead from the whole. In fact, they never were trailing at any point of this match. First quarter was semi-close. There was a couple points in the first half, especially where Geelong looked like they were going to get back into it, but they kicked the last 3 goals of the third quarter just to give them a sniff, but really Carlton controlled the game from the outset. Massive finish as well from Carlton. They kicked 9 goals in the final quarter, which was a great effort from them. Looking at how this game played out, I think the biggest concern for oppositions coming up against Carlton for the rest of this season is going to be this last quarter surge that Carlton are starting to put together regularly. 4 weeks in a row they've had really good last quarters. So the last 4 weeks they've kicked 5 goals in the last, then 8, then 5, then 9. For plus 12 points against Gold Coast, plus 29 against Port Adelaide, plus 11 against Essendon, and this week plus 36 against Geelong. So what they're putting together in the fourth quarter of a game of football is really impressive and shows that they can run out a game, which is obviously a massive point in football when teams are very close across the board. The ability to run out a game and continue to score in that last quarter is very important. So Carlton looking very, very good in that facet of the game. Last time these two teams played, Carlton really kind of struggled with efficiency going forward. They cost themselves in that regard, and that's probably why they lost that matchup. This time, no issues there at all. They returned a great forward efficiency. In fact, it was their second best return of the year so far, so that was a great positive result for the Blues. We also mentioned last week in the preview episode about They look to get their main source of the ball from clearances, which they did well again. They won the stoppage clearances by 13, 35 to 22. So that's a pretty big domination in stoppage clearances. They did lose centre clearances by 2, but overall that's not too big of an issue when they dominated the stoppage clearances throughout the game. Geelong, we mentioned about how good they are from the turnover, winning the ball off the opposition and not giving it back. They weren't able to do that this week at all. They lost that area of the game, and that's where they really focus on probably their best play is from causing turnovers and then looking after the ball, and they just did not do that this week at all. So a massive spot that Carlton maybe went into this game and really focused on, or maybe it's just the way the game played out, but Geelong just couldn't get their normal game going at any point. And the final result kind of shows that was the case. Blues controlled the game, never looked like losing. They moved second on the ladder. Well, I think they were already second on the ladder, but stay second on the ladder. Things just looking really good for them at the moment. No major issues for them out of this game. Geelong, however, their season's teetering on a point at the moment. They dropped to 7th on the ladder. They're 8 wins, 6 losses, so they're still above 500, to put it in American talk. But the way their season's going, they're 1-6 over the last 7 matches, and not too often is a team going to win big games going down the wire if they put together that sort of period. At starting, it already was a concern, I believe, but it's definitely into a concerning period now for them. 1-6 over 7-week period is quite abysmal, and it is down there with the worst teams in the league over the last 7 weeks. So it's lucky for them that they did have a very good start to the year, because otherwise this season would have them down at the bottom of the ladder with Adelaide and probably St Kilda. Looking at some of the best players, most important things that happened, the De Koning brothers went against each other in the ruck, and to be honest, that might be where the game was won. Tom De Koning for Carlton just dominated his brother absolutely from basically the start of the game, just bullied him out of it, and yeah. Sam did have some moments, he kicked a goal, but overall Tom was definitely the winner of that matchup. The Talls for Carlton in the forward line, they did really well. Curnow kicked 5, Mackay 3. If you can get 8 goals out of those two every week, you'd be more than happy with your position. And Cripps had 41 touches, 14 clearances. He was very, very good. So that's there was lots of other good players. Walsh was good, plenty of others. But overall, to sum up this match, Carlton were just the better team. Got the job done. Game number 2 for the weekend was a Saturday afternoon game. What looked like potentially being one of the games of the round, to be honest. Port Adelaide versus Brisbane at Adelaide Oval. Port Adelaide's form not great going in. Brisbane's form has certainly picked up, but the game just did not play out kind of quite how we expected. I did tip Brisbane, so I got that bit right, but I did not see them blowing them out by 79 points. An absolute thrashing in the end. Brisbane kicked 23-14, 152. Massive score to Port Adelaide's 10-13, 73. Not much more to say about the score and this match really than just, wow. 79 points is a big margin. First quarter was pretty close. There was only a few goals in it. Even halfway through the second quarter, there was only 2 goals in it when Ollie Lord kicked a goal. But then after that, it was just a domination from Brisbane. They put it out and never looked like losing from that point onwards, really. Really, really tough day for Port Adelaide and their fans. I don't know what to say about it. That's 3 losses in a row for Port Adelaide as well. So their season's a bit like Geelong, starting to slip away from them. And they really need to find some form very quickly. Looking at some of Port's numbers, they lost the inside 50 count 3 times in a row this year. 3 times in a row now, obviously this year. This was their worst of them. And from the first 11 weeks, they only lost the inside 50 count twice. So they were 9-2, and then since then they've gone 0-3. So just a concerning trend really over the last month of football for them. This was their worst clearance game of the year, so another concerning stat. They're typically a very good clearance team. But yeah, they just didn't put it together here. They were minus 15 in overall clearances. They did win centre clearances by 3, but to go down 15 in total clearances is pretty big thrashing, to be honest. They did win the tackle count by 25, but that tends to happen when you're chasing the opposition around all day. Brisbane, looking at them, this is their third 70-point win of the year. That's a pretty good stat, really. I don't know. I haven't actually looked. I probably should have. I don't think there's any other teams that have done 3 70-plus point wins this season. Certainly wouldn't be many if there's any. So, fantastic effort from them in that regard. There was this one. They beat Richmond by 119, and their other massive win was, I'm just trying to think, maybe, who was it? North Melbourne, which was also over in Adelaide. So 2 of their 3 biggest wins of the year were in Adelaide, which is pretty funny. But yes, just a dominant display from them. This was their best contested footy game of the year. They were plus 40 for the game, which is really, really big domination in contested footy. Their previous best this year was plus 26, which was in round 4 against North Melbourne when they won by 70 points. So, really positive result in that regard. No concerns there. Inside 50 count for Brisbane also. They got 71 inside 50s, which is, I think, this equals second most of any team this year, or very close to if it's not. Second time they've done 71, in fact. Once again, the game against North Melbourne, they had 71. So massive inside 50 game for Port Adelaide. Looking at some of the best players, not for Port Adelaide, for Brisbane, obviously. Looking at some of the best players, Lachie Neale had 37 disposals, 10 clearances. He was outstanding, as he usually is. Eric Hipwood continued his good stretch of games even. A couple of weeks ago he kicked 6. This week he kicked 5, so massive from him. The Big O dominated the ruck. Oscar McInerney dominated the ruck, got forward, kicked 3 goals as well, so a really, really good performance from him. Overall, Brisbane just across the board were really good. As for Port Adelaide, not so much. They had a couple players that played okay, but certainly not enough that you'd write home about any of their players. Looking at where these two teams are at, obviously Brisbane, their season's chugging along all of a sudden. They've only lost 1 match since round 7. There was a draw in there as well, but obviously their season's really kicking into gear. This gets them into 10th on the ladder, which from where they were is outstanding. Their percentage is still very, very high. They have the second best percentage of anyone in the AFL right now, so that's also a massive positive for them. Obviously they have the draw, so they're out of sync with some teams, but just to put a little bit of perspective where they are less than a win away from being 5th on the ladder right now, because their percentage is way better than Fremantle's. So right in the thick of it, really, and only 2 wins off Essendon in 3rd spot. So really, really good position all of a sudden for Brisbane after their really tough start of the year. I certainly wouldn't be writing them off from top 4 spot where they are right now. They're playing good enough football for sure. Their numbers are really good. Their numbers have been good all year. They just struggled to convert a little bit at the start of the year and really be efficient with their putting scores on the board and getting converting into shots was a big issue for them. Whereas recently they've certainly turned that around, and if they continue to do that, they'll be in a really good spot. And this week they come up against Melbourne up at the Gabba for another chance for another win. They'll win that. They go above Melbourne for sure, potentially above a couple other teams. Geelong have a tough one this week. So, and Fremantle are playing against Sydney. So there's potentially 3 teams they could pass this week without too much effort. Obviously they win, but without anything going against what we would expect. So they could be 7th on the ladder after next week. They're looking very dangerous this year. Potentially top 4, as I said, and if you went up against them in the top 4, you'd be certainly worried. They're a very good team still. Certainly don't write them off. As for Port Adelaide, they're still in the 8 just. They're sitting 8th on the ladder. They're 8-6, so same record as Geelong. Obviously slightly worse percentage. 3 losses in a row, as we mentioned. Look, it's not all doom and gloom for them. They have St Kilda this week. It's probably almost a must-win for them. It's an away game, which is obviously not great for them, but at the same time, I don't know. I wouldn't write them off in that game, but just what we've seen from them over the last month, especially, it's hard to see them playing finals football on current form. They could quite easily turn it around. They'd won 3 in a row before these 3 losses, so if they can get themselves back into that form, yeah, they're a chance, but they certainly haven't really been showing that of late, which is certainly concerning for the Port Adelaide Football Club. We'll now move on to the 3rd game of the weekend. The Battle for the Bridge, Part 2 of 2024, went in the end very similarly to Battle of the Bridge Part 1. That one was won by, I think, 29 points by Sydney. This one was won by 27 points by Sydney. A weird sort of game, really. First quarter was really close. Sydney had a 3-point lead at quarter time. From about, where were we? Hang on, I wrote these numbers down. So from the 11.5 minute mark of the second quarter through till the 5-minute mark of the third quarter, Sydney kicked 10 goals to GWS's 0 goals. And that's more than where the game was won, seeing they only won by about 4 goals, 4.5 goals. So that period, once again, Sydney have done it a lot of this year where they just managed to kick goals typically very quickly without conceding any. This one wasn't probably as quick. They kicked 4 quick ones, then they had a break, then they kicked a few more. So overall, yeah, they did dominate it, but it was just weird that it was GWS were really in the game if you take out that little, almost a full quarter of football. After that point, GWS fought their way back into it. Never looked like winning, but they obviously got within about 4 goals. Not a terrible display from them. They were going up against the best team in the competition. They gave it a crack, but in the end, Sydney were just the better polished team. Looking at some of the stats, what have we got? GWS have now only won 3 of their last 9 games. So another team that the form doesn't look too great for. Their start to the season was really good, but they're starting to drop a few games. And obviously this was against the top team, so they probably don't expect to win this one, but they've dropped a few others that perhaps they should have won. They lost the inside 50 count again, so it's really, really struggling in that area at the moment. They're 2-8 across the last 10 weeks. Their forward efficiency was really down this week, so that was a little bit of a disappointment for them there. If they had maybe converted their opportunities a bit better, maybe they could have been in this game a little bit better. And their defensive efficiency has been really bad 2 weeks in a row, so that's something they really need to work on. They're just not defending well enough at the moment. Granted, Sydney didn't score a massive score. They got to 102, which is about their average. But GWS just need to find a way to stop conceding so many points. You take out the Hawthorn game down at Newtaz, and they have been conceding more than they would like to over the last 6 or so weeks. Looking at some stats for Sydney, they finally won a first quarter. When I say finally, they had lost I think 3 or 4 in a row first quarters. 4 in a row. So they'd lost to... They'd lost Carlton, Bulldogs, Geelong and Adelaide in the first quarters. This time they win one, so massive result for them in that regard. They will be happy with that. They finally got rid of that little hoodoo that had been haunting them over the last month or so. Their second quarter was their best point differential for a quarter this year, which is a little surprising. It was plus 37, which is really, really dominant. Don't get me wrong, but I was a little surprised that they haven't won any other quarters by that amount yet this year. Obviously, they haven't been... I mean, they've been winning games by decent margins. Like, all their wins have been... well, in fact, every win, except for one, has been by more than 20 points. But they have only got one win over 55 points, which was Hawthorn by 76. So, most of their wins are in that, like, 20 to 40 point range. So they don't blow teams out, but they certainly win by enough. Kind of a similar makeup, I guess, kind of to what Collingwood were doing last year, where they don't blow teams away too often. They stay competitive for most of the game, and then they just put a little burst on, and whether it's in the first quarter, the third quarter, second quarter, wherever it is in the game, they just put a burst on that puts a margin on the opposition, and they just kind of hold it from there. Collingwood did that a lot last year, and Sydney have done it a lot this year. They won the clearances, so they're, again, a couple weeks in a row now that they've won clearances. 3 weeks in a row, actually. They haven't been bad at clearances this year, but still 3 weeks in a row winning that. Also 3 weeks in a row winning centre clearances, which is where they've kind of struggled a bit more. Like, stoppage clearances, they've been fairly consistent all year. Centre clearances, they had been struggling, but that's 3 weeks in a row that they've won that. And last week was the best result of any team in centre clearances, plus 15. Followed it up this week with a plus 7. So starting to look really dangerous in the centre clearances as well, which is concerning for opposition teams. Looking at some of the best players, Goulden had 41 touches, 1 goal. 973 metres gained, so massive performance from him. I would imagine probably gets the 3 Brownlow votes. We saw him poll really well last year in the Brownlow. Only thing stopping a Sydney Brownlow medalist this year is probably just the depth in their midfield. Goulden, Warner and Heaney are all going to poll massive. Yes, Sydney are going to get most of the votes most of the weeks. But those 3 are going to be fighting for votes every game. Tom Green was good. He had 35 disposals. And once again, I think the most underrated midfielder in their midfield group is Rowbottom. He was really, really good again. He was great last week, and he was just as good, if not better, this week. He had 32 disposals, 11 clearances and 10 score involvements. So, fantastic effort from him. I think he's been the reason they've really got better at centre clearances. He's been really, really good in centre clearances over the last 2-3 weeks. Looking at where these two teams sit at the moment, we'll start with GWS, as they were the home team. Another team that's sitting 8 and 6. They're 6th on the ladder. Their percentage is still pretty healthy. They started the season really well as well, so that's them, Geelong and Port Adelaide have all kind of had similar trajectories this season, where they started the season well. They've dropped off a little bit, they're struggling a little bit. Still sit in the top 8, so it's not all doom and gloom, but they're now, 5 wins behind Sydney at top of the ladder, so that's pretty much shot. They're 2 wins behind Carlton. Percentage is still okay, so it's not impossible to get back up to where Carlton are, maybe. But they need to start winning games. That's their biggest issue at the moment. They have Adelaide this week, so big game, big opportunity for them to get a win on the board and try and get themselves into some form. Because, yes, they did beat Port Adelaide last week, but that wasn't their best performance. They got the win. They need to show more, though, this week against Adelaide. They need to put together a 4-quarter performance that really shows that they are a competitive team this year. Sorry about that. My throat, after 25 minutes of talking, is struggling. But we battle on. We've still got 3 more games, so we've got to keep cracking. The other team in this match, obviously Sydney. There's not much more to say about them. They're sitting top of the ladder. 13 wins, 1 loss. Massive percentage compared to everyone else in the AFL. No concerns for them. They're still the best number 1 offense in the AFL. They're also the number 1 defense in the AFL. Only team that hasn't conceded 1,000 points yet this season. So everything's going rosy for the Sydney Swans. No concerns for them anywhere across the board, really. So, yeah, they're happy with how the season is progressing. Game number 4 of the weekend was a Saturday night, Melbourne versus North Melbourne. This was another weird game. Did not expect this to be the closest game of the weekend, and even at 3/4 time, I thought there was no chance it was going to be the closest game of the weekend. But funny things happen in football, and North Melbourne heartbreak is one of those things. 2 weeks in a row that they've gone down by less than a kick, which is very tough for them. So Melbourne kicked 11-4, 70. North Melbourne kicked a 10-7, 67. This is one of the first times this year that North Melbourne have been the least accurate team of the 2 in their matches. Still kicked 10-7, so they were very accurate. It was just the other team was even more so. Funny thing about this game, I guess, funny stat from this game, neither team kicked a behind in the second half, which is, I don't know if that's ever happened in AFL before. It probably has, but still crazy stat. Melbourne kicked 5 straight in the second half to North Melbourne's 7 straight. Looking at Melbourne's stat line, I guess first, they're still struggling to score. They got to 70 this week, which, I mean, it's not their worst performance. Certainly not as bad as their 2 previous games where they really struggled. So the last 2 they had 49 and 51, but this puts it to, 6 out of their last 7 games. They haven't made it to 80, which certainly is a concern if you want to play finals. You have to be able to get to 80, and they haven't been able to do that at all in the last 2 months, other than their 1 game against St Kilda where they cracked 100 just. Another concerning thing for them, they've only managed to win 2 out of their last 13 quarters. That's a horrific stat, to be honest. They lost all 4 against Fremantle. They lost all 4 against Collingwood. They only managed to win 2 out of the 4 quarters against North Melbourne here. So that's not looking good for them. Also, their disposal efficiency was terrible in this game. It was their second worst performance of the year. The only one that was worse was when they lost to West Coast. So, reason for that, I don't know. It's interesting that it's gone against West Coast and North Melbourne, their 2 worst disposal games. Is it mental? I don't know, but not great there. Their forward efficiency was also their worst performance of the year, so they just, as I said, they couldn't score. They were getting the ball forward enough, they just could not score. They're a team that doesn't typically do too great at the inside 50 count, and they weren't great in that regard this week, but they were good enough to certainly create more opportunities than they did. Their defensive efficiency, defensive efforts were what kept them in this game in the end, keeping the opposition to 67. 10 goals is what kept them in the game and got them the win in the end. Would they have beaten many other teams this weekend? I'm not sure, but it certainly wasn't their best performance. But they walk away with the 4 points, which is probably what they needed out of this game. Looking over at North Melbourne, 2 heartbreaks in a row for them, which is disappointing for North Melbourne supporters. They've been through a lot this year. They've had a really tough year. And to lose 2 games in a row by less than a kick is rough. Thankfully, they did win the week before against West Coast. If they hadn't won that one, then it would be really tough times. But they are showing positive signs, so that is certainly a good thing. They've only managed to win 12 quarters for this whole year so far, and 6 of them have been over the last 3 weeks. So, certainly turning things around in that regard. I think a major area that is really starting to show is their clearance game. They're really improving in the clearances. So that's a positive sign for them as well. 4 weeks in a row they've won the contested footy, which is huge because they hadn't won it in the first 10 matches this year. So they were 0-10 in contested footy after 10 weeks to win 4 in a row. It's no surprise that they're starting to be in games. I did say earlier this year that I was a bit concerned about the fact that they just weren't seeming like they wanted to be in the contested footy sphere at all, which I don't know if it would have changed much in the start of their season, but it at least shows intent and gets the whole team together on one thing, and they've shown a lot better of that over the last month. So positive signs for North Melbourne. Looking at some of the best players, North Melbourne players were probably the best players on the field, to be honest. Sheasel had 27 touches, 2 goals. He was great. Zerha kicked 4 goals. LDU, Luke Davies, Yanaki got 31 disposals, 8 clearances. He was very good. Jack Viney had 12 clearances for Melbourne, so he was also very good. Where does this put these two teams? Sorry, I've opened the wrong tab. This puts, I guess, Melbourne in contention. They've obviously had a really rough little period. They're 2 weeks before this one, 2 games, over a 3-week period, were really bad. This one wasn't a great performance, but it was a win, so that's a positive. They're sitting 8 and 6, so they'll level on points with GWS, Geelong, and Port Adelaide. I don't know if they're the worst of those 4 in terms of prospects for this year. All 4 of them kind of don't have great prospects for the year. I'd be surprised if... So there's 4 teams, 6 through 9. I could almost see all of them missing finals. I think, in my heart of hearts, that 2 of them probably do, which will probably be GWS and maybe Geelong. But Brisbane will come into the 8. I still think Bulldogs will come into the 8. So there's 2 of them gone. So maybe only one of them makes finals. Maybe just GWS. Anyway, there's a long way to go. There's still plenty of football to play, so we can't get too caught up in the what ifs and what abs. But it certainly looks a lot to me like the Melbourne are in a little bit of trouble. Their percentage, of course, is not great, but neither are the teams around them, other than GWS. Geelong and Port Adelaide are very close in percentage. Looking at North Melbourne, they're still last on the ladder, obviously. If they had have won their last 2 games, they'd all of a sudden be 17th on the ladder. They'd be above Richmond, and they'd only be percentage behind West Coast. But that's not how it's played out. They've got a big game against the Doggies this weekend, which you'd expect the Doggies to take care of them, but North are a better team over the last month, so you just never know. On to game number 5. This was a Sunday afternoon of football. I was going to say at the G, but it was at Marvel Stadium. Essendon, West Coast. Essendon won this one by 30 points, kicking 19-8, 122 to West Coast, 13-14, 92. High scoring game, like a few of the games this weekend, to be honest. Essendon kind of looked in control most of the way. There was a few periods there where West Coast really got themselves into the game. Obviously, West Coast were leading at quarter time by a point. There was a point in the third quarter where Petroselli kicked a goal, and it was like, oh, maybe they are still in it. And then again in the last quarter, there was a goal by Jake Petroselli again that just got him within reach of a sniff. But then Essendon kicked a couple quick ones, one through Langford and one through Caldwell, and that kind of put them to bed. Ended up winning by 20 points, as I said. Yeah. Looking at, I guess, some of the stats for this game, Essendon controlled the ball, especially uncontested footy. We'll go into some of those numbers very shortly, but they kind of struggled to turn that into inside 50 entries and potential scores, I guess. They did have more shots at goal than West Coast from 2 less inside 50s. So Eagles won the inside 50s even though Essendon dominated possession, which is just a weird little stat, I guess. The quality of inside 50 entries probably were on Essendon's side of things. Once they actually got it inside 50, they were very good. But it was just weird that they had so much of the ball but didn't really progress with it too well. West Coast won both clearances by 9 and inside 50s by 2, which are both areas of the game that they struggle with, and I kind of expected them to really struggle against the Bombers. But they won those 2 areas, which are key areas, and probably a reason why they only lost by 30 points, and not 10 goals plus. So positives there for West Coast in that regard. Dons had a lot of uncontested footy, plus 104 for the game, which is massive. A massive number for them. Other teams do sometimes win by over 100 in uncontested footy. This is the first time Dons have done it. Their previous best this year was 58, plus 58. So almost double their best previous from this year. So yeah, just a domination of uncontested footy. As I said, Bombers were really good once getting it inside 50 at creating opportunities. They had more shots, but kicked a few out on the full, couple misses. But overall kicked very straight. 19 goals, 8 is a good return. Just the 3rd time this year that the Eagles have won the clearances. As we said, they don't usually do well, so a positive there. But it is the 3rd time this year they've been beaten by over 100 in uncontested footy. So the Bulldogs beat them by 108, Adelaide beat them by 124, and Essendon beat them by 104 in uncontested footy. So just a growing issue, I guess, with West Coast is their inability to stop the other team from just having uncontested footy for days. Whether that means they need to work harder or more efficiently around the ground just to put a little bit more pressure on their opposition. I don't know, but it's certainly an area of the Eagles game that they certainly will have to look at. Maybe not for the rest of this year, but going into next season, if they want to improve, I think that's an area that they really will have to focus, because you're not going to win many games giving up more than 100 uncontested disposals in a game, or possession, a couple of the best players. Stringer kicked 5 goals from 20 disposals. He also had 4 centre clearances, so massive game from Jakey Stringer, the package, and also Zach Merritt. He's having a great season. He's possibly top 5 footballer in the AFL. He's right around 5th spot, I think. I'm going to do a video in the next couple weeks about player rankings, so keep an eye out for that. They'll go out on YouTube in the next couple weeks. But he had 29 disposals, 1 goal, 5 goal assists. I'm not sure if anyone else has had 5 goal assists this year in a game. Either way, it's a very, very high number. There's been plenty of people that have had 4. I don't remember anyone getting to 5 yet this year. So where does this leave us with these two teams? Essendon jump up to 3rd on the ladder, obviously jumping above Collingwood, who had the bye this week. So all teams are now on 14 matches played, so it's an even look again for the first time in about a month that all teams are on the same amount of matches played, which is a good thing. But yeah, they're sitting 3rd on the ladder. Their percentage obviously is a concern. They do have the draw, so not a major concern. However, Fremantle are 1 game behind them now, and also obviously have a draw and much better percentage. So there's a chance that might come into play. if those two teams end up on the same amount of wins and obviously draws. But yeah, they're cruising up towards the top of the ladder. They've got a massive game against Geelong this weekend. Obviously, Geelong's form is not great. Massive game for both teams. The winner, you can almost lock in September. For the loser, if Geelong lose, it's going to be hard for them. If the Bombers lose, they're not out of contention, obviously, but it certainly makes a top 4 spot certainly harder. So yeah, that's where they are. West Coast, they're sitting 16th on the ladder, 3 wins, 11 losses. Still, their season hasn't been a disaster. They've shown some positive signs. They have Hawthorn up this week, so not an easy game for them. Hawthorn are in some good form, but at least they're starting to show some positive signs here and there. Obviously, their clearances and inside 50s were those positives this week. As I harped on, they need to work on their uncontested footy or their ability to stop the other team from having so much uncontested footy. One final game happened this weekend. It only finished, for me, about 2 hours ago. Obviously, this doesn't go out till Monday, so the game was yesterday, but the game did only finish a couple hours ago, so not too long ago. And it was Fremantle hosting Gold Coast over in Perth. Freo won at 12-13-85 to Gold Coast 10-5-65. Gold Coast kicked the first couple after that point. Fremantle kind of controlled it all the way, never looked too much in danger of losing it. Brandon Ellis did kick a goal with about 6 minutes to go in the game. They just kind of gave him a sniff, got him within just over 2 goals behind. I think it was 14 points. But in the end, Freo did enough to win the game. Looking at... Ooh, I've got to flip over. Looking at some of the things from the game. We'll get into Gold Coast in a minute. But we'll start with Freo. They were back to their dominant best in clearances this week. They weren't bad last week. They won the clearance game against the Doggies, but they only just won it, whereas this week they full smacked them. 4 in centre clearances and 8 in stoppage clearances, so positive result for them there. And I guess it was also a game that was kind of back to normal for Fremantle after 2 weird and wacky results for them. Obviously, they're not known for being offensively great. They scored 85 here, which is around about their average, slightly above their average, but not too much. Whereas 2 weeks ago, or 2 games ago, when they played Melbourne, they obviously scored 150, which is very out of the norm for them. Their defense is really, really good typically, average 74 points against. This week, it was back down below that at 65, whereas last week, they conceded 150. So, the last 2 matches had been really strange for them in that regard, whereas this one, they've kind of gone back to more what you'd expect from Fremantle Football Club. We'll jump into Gold Coast because I think this is the most interesting team in the AFL. If you haven't watched them a video on their mid-season review video, which came out a couple of weeks ago on the YouTube channel, I suggest you go look at it because I think it's my best knowledgeable episode I've put out yet. And it just sums up where they're at. They still haven't won an away game, and the numbers are staggering. Whether it comes down to Gold Coast football is just different than everywhere else in terms of slick conditions and whatnot. I don't think it is that, though. I just don't know what it is. It's crazy, though. I think the next 3 weeks for them will be really telling, whether they are that good at home and that bad away. They play Collingwood next week at home, which will be as tough a challenge as they've had at home this year, you'd expect. Obviously, the Bombers probably so far is their hardest challenge they've had at home. So if they can win that, then maybe truly they are a really good home team. And then they have easier away game. Not 100% sure who it is. Just give me a second while I look it up. I think it's going to be North Melbourne at Marvel Stadium. So if they are going to win an away game, that is the one that they probably do it against. So if they lose to Collingwood this week or they lose to North Melbourne the next week, you can probably write finals off for them. They need to win the next 2 games if they want to play finals, in my opinion. So looking at some of these stats that I went through in the mid-season review video, because they all kind of came true this week. So in away games, they average minus 9.2 inside 50s per game. They were minus 9 this week. Disposal efficiency, they're minus 1.5%. This week they were minus 1.4. Forward efficiency, they got 38.6%. Today they were 39.1%. Defensive efficiency, they go at 46% usually in away games. This week, 47.3, so even worse. Setting clearances, minus 3.3 per game. This week, they were minus 4. Stoppage clearances, minus 3.8 per game. This week, they were minus 8. The only area that they went against their average was contested possessions. They're usually minus 11 in away games. This week, they were plus 4. So that is one positive. But the fact that all their numbers continually stack up week in, week out is a worrying sign for them for sure, in my opinion at least. Some of the best players on the ground. Brayshaw had 32 disposals, 1 goal, 7 clearances, 8 tackles. Great game from him. And Hayden Young was also outstanding. He had 24 disposals, 3 goals, 12 score assists. So a very good performance. Looking at where these two teams are sitting now, Fremantle jump up to 5th on the ladder. Great result for them this week. Obviously, it'll be interesting to see how they go. They've got Sydney next week, who arguably they played as good as last time they played them, but that was obviously at Optus Stadium. This time they have to go to the SCG. Tough game for them, so certainly not an easy win. So potentially a few teams could jump them this week, but nonetheless they're 5th on the ladder and in a solid spot looking towards finals for sure. As for Gold Coast, as I said, the next couple of weeks is huge for them. I personally think they have to win the next 2 to play finals. If they win one of them, there's still a chance, but it's going to be tough. And if they don't win either of these next 2, you can put a line through their season. They are done and dusted, in my opinion. 7-7 is where they're at. It's not dreadful. There's a big clog of teams from Collingwood, well, even from Essendon, really, down to Hawthorn that are within the space of 2.5 games, from 3rd down to 13th, sorry. And if you chuck Carlton, who's 2nd on the ladder, there's only 3 games between 2nd and 13th. So teams can still drop or rise massively, but I think the next 2 weeks, especially for Gold Coast, is telling and going to be very, very important for them. So that is all the matches that happened this weekend, round 15. Let's have a look at how my tips went. We're going to have a look at them because I actually did okay this week. So, game 1, Carlton-Geelong. I said Carlton by 7 points, and let's be honest, Carlton absolutely destroyed them, but it still is a tick nonetheless. Carlton won by 63, so it was a fair way off on the margin. But we got it right. Game 2, we went Brisbane by 10 points. Brisbane won it by 79 points. So once again, we were off by a long way on the margin, but at least we got the right team. Game number 3, we went Sydney by 18. Pretty close in this one. Sydney won it by 27. Game number 4, we went Melbourne by 36 points. Melbourne won by 3 points, so we're a fair way off on that margin. But nonetheless, we got it right as well. Then the Sunday games, we went Essendon by 35. They ended up winning by 30, so that's a massive tick. We're only 5 points off. Go us. And then the final game of the week, we went Fremantle by 12. They ended up winning by 20, so only 8 points off. So 6 of 6 right, which is a big result for us. Obviously, the first 2 games we were a long way off on the margin. Even the fourth one, Melbourne, we were. The other three were really close though, so that's not too bad of a week of footy tipping for us, really. This pretty much brings us to the end of the episode, but before we leave, just hang around for another minute or so while I talk you through what we've got coming up this week on All Aussie Rules. Content-wise, coming out on... This obviously has released... This was released on Monday, the 24th of June. On Wednesday, the 26th of June, will be a bonus video on the YouTube channel. I'll try and bring out a bonus video, at least one every week. It'll be like a 10-15 minute video. It hasn't been recorded yet, but I'll be recording it over the next day or so. That's going to be a ladder prediction. I'll be running through my predicted results into the AFL ladder predictor. We'll see who's going to finish where. So that'll be coming out on Wednesday on YouTube. So come back and check that out. Or if you're on Spotify right now, head over to YouTube and check that one out. It'll be interesting to see where teams are going to sit at the end of the year. So come back, check that out. And then as always, Friday will be our round 16 preview episode. It'll be episode 36 of the podcast. So come back and check that out. I appreciate all the love and support. As always, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. This has been All Aussie Rules. That was round 15, and I'll catch us on the next one.